opportunity of looking at it later. It will be posted on the FCI website. It will be posted available for the general public, and Robert has very kindly agreed to this happening. So I'm going to start off this webinar by introducing, first of all, myself. I'm Angus Wallace, a proud Scot who migrated to England in 1971 to educate the English and remained in England because it was a long, hard job. In the year 2000, I set up the Faculty of Medical Informatics at the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. And we ran that for 7 years, very successfully, but the college decided that its main focus was surgery and not informatics. And so they decided to discontinue the master's degree course that I started. Subsequently, I have worked with John Williams, and the Faculty of Clinical Informatics was set up, and I am one of the founding fellows, with others that are at this webinar, of the Faculty of Clinical Informatics. Welcome to all of you. We have a mixture of judges, ePoster presenters, and podium presenters for our conference, which is running 29th to 30th November this year, 2023. I am introducing Robert Trehane Jones, who is a fellow of the British Computer Society, but he's actually a GP, has been a GP for 17 years. He then became involved with software development for medicine, and he's now an eminent person in informatics and has kindly offered to help with this presentation. And we're going to kick off with Robert talking about hybrid conferences, tips and tricks for presenters. And I'm going to hand over to Robert now, and we'll give him the main screen. Can you do that, Jerry, please?
You have the screen.
Thanks very much, Angus. Yes, good evening, everybody. Good to be able to join you. As Angus has suggested, yes, I'm a doctor. I'm also a clinical informatician. I've been involved with computing, mainly primary care based for my entire career. But the other half of my life, for the last 40 years, I've been working in broadcasting and commentating chiefly for international sport. And I now run various presentation skills courses. I train new commentators, particularly for rowing, and I also run media training courses for many of our GB Olympians. So the skills that I'm going to be talking about in the next few minutes are actually generic presentation skills. As Angus has described, yes, the skills that you come away from this session with will hopefully assist you when you are presenting on a podium or when you're presenting online for an ePoster. But these will be generic presentation skills that will hopefully stand you in good stead for any presentation, because I firmly believe that presenting is actually a dramatic performance. You are metaphorically or not standing up on a stage, you are addressing your audience, and you want to come across in a way that supports the material that you're about to present. We've all been in the profession for long enough to have sat through some pretty boring presentations at medical meetings. And I am down on record as having interrupted various eminent speakers to call them to task, because I'm thinking, if I don't do it, then who is? So when they stand up and say, I'm sorry, you probably can't read this slide from the back of the room, I'm the one that stands up and says, then why bother showing us this slide? Because what really has irritated me throughout my career is people who have achieved a great deal of eminence in their medical field and are invited to occupy podia at seriously scientific meetings, and nobody has ever taken them to one side and say, do you know, you really could do better. And as a clinical tutor during my GP career, I used to specialize in running conferences where I was attracting good speakers that also had expert knowledge to share rather than the other way around. And that was quite a turnabout in the way that we recruited speakers for these particular conferences. And it was very well received by the participants. Sorry, that's rather a long-winded way of describing what I'm hoping to do, but I hope it resonates with some of the subject material for this evening. So we're talking about, in this instance, how to present yourself on this screen. We've only got a small space to be able to do that, and you need to be able to come across in a way that reflects well on yourself, where you work, your colleagues, to support the material that you're about to show. And the old adage of fail to prepare, prepare to fail could not be more true than it is right here in these circumstances. Because if you start off on the wrong foot, if you haven't had a dry run in particular with the technology, Angus and I had a dry run on this technology just 15 minutes ago to make sure that we were all set up for the real thing. If you don't have a dry run, then that is a risk. And I speak from personal experience, as I'm sure you all do in your various circumstances. I can remember presenting at a conference which happened to be in Leicester some years ago, and I didn't have the opportunity to do a dry run. I stepped smartly up to the lectern with my laptop at the appointed time, and lo and behold, my operating system wanted to do a 20 meg download right then and there, which I could not interrupt. So there was a learning point there, wasn't there? So why don't I now demonstrate what can go wrong when you're trying to present yourself online? And I'm going to do that in a very graphic way, hopefully. First of all, I'm going to turn off my my screen, and then I'm going to do a bit of jiggery pokery in the background. So just bear with me, if you will. And in a moment.
At this stage, we wonder where Robert has gone.
You do indeed, but I'm still here. It's just that I'm doing some stuff around the back. Right, so here I am. Hello. Now, how many Zoom calls, and obviously other platforms are available, how many Zoom calls have you joined over the years that look a bit like this? Because I have joined lots of them. And I'm thinking, for goodness sake, why doesn't this person get their act together? Because already I'm thinking, if they can't present themselves well on screen, then that, for me, lessens the information that they're about to impart, no matter how expert they are. So one of the things I've done, for instance, I've got what light there is behind me. So my face is largely in shadow. Another thing that I've got is the fact that this happens to be a Dell laptop that I'm using. And Dell has this famous camera called the Dell Nose Cam. The camera is below the screen. So essentially it's looking right up my nostrils, which is not a good view, I think you'll agree. So in order to improve the whole thing, why don't we turn on a light in front of me? Right, well, that's a start, isn't it? But it's only a start. What I really need to do is to lift up my laptop, maybe, so that the nose cam is pointing directly in my face. Well, I can tell you right now, I've experimented like that and it doesn't work like that. So that is why I've invested in an external camera that fits to the top of my screen. So why don't we try that one? Well, that's a bit better, isn't it? Yeah. So essentially, I've now got an external camera and the lens is on the same horizontal plane as my eye line, and I'm looking straight into the camera. Again, when people use external cameras, quite often they've got it sort of mounted over there somewhere. And I'm looking into the screen because that's where my colleagues are, whereas actually you're all out there and I really need to be addressing you. So try and have the camera and the screen as closely as possible together. But then let's tidy it up again because it really doesn't look too special. The light that I'm using in this instance is actually a standard angle poise light with an incandescent bulb. So it's giving out this rather yellowy tinge, which isn't particularly nice. So what I'm going to do is now swap that for some white light that I've got, and suddenly the whole thing begins to make a bit more sense. But what you see around me is the background of my study, and I'd rather you didn't see that. So what are the options that I've got? Well, I could blur it using a virtual background like that, or I've got a whole series of backgrounds that I use for different purposes. So why don't I use that one? And now we are back onto square one, and this is the view that you first saw me when we started this webinar. Again, this is not the be all and end all, because actually positioning your lens and your laptop closer or farther away again reflects on the impression that you're likely to give. So if I'm sort of way back like this, that's not good, is it? You can see when you're monitoring your screen, because you can see yourself on your screen ahead of you. So the ideal is to get your head and shoulders in shot. So why then do so many people want to sort of climb into the screen like this? It's totally unnecessary and it gives the wrong impression. So please don't do it, right? So sit back. The ideal, in my view, and it's only my view, you can agree or not, is to essentially look like a BBC newsreader when they're sitting up at their desk. And again, remember the thing to do is not necessarily to look at the screen, but to look at the camera. Now, at this distance, you probably can't tell which I'm looking at, but sometimes if the camera and the screen are slightly offset, then you can see people's eyes flickering back and forwards between the two, which is to be avoided if possible. When you're choosing your background, again, have it in mind the nature of the presentation and how appropriate the background is for your audience. So yes, you might have a background that shows the interior of a bar in Thailand, which impresses all your mates, but is possibly not the best background for a scientific conference. I remember being on one meeting once where one of my colleagues, who was a keen sailor, decided to have as his virtual background the view from his dinghy as he was beating to windward in a force 7, which was terribly scenic, with waves crashing hither and thither. But we all started to feel seasick after about 30 seconds. We had to ask him to turn it off. So choose something that is appropriate for the circumstances, and again, that helps complement the overall impression that you're trying to give when you begin your formal presentation. Okay, so in a nutshell, make sure the lighting is adequate from the front and is of an appropriate nature to not provide too much glare, not provide too much reflection, and is ideally of a color that complements the impression that you're trying to give. Number two, make sure that your camera lens is on the same horizontal plane as your eye line. Make sure that your virtual background, if you use one, is appropriate for the circumstances, and then maintain eye contact with your audience as you would in any similar situation. Okay, those are my bullet points. We'll take questions at the end. So for now, back to you, Angus.
Thank you very much, Robert. Some very salient points there that are really important. I'm now going to go on to a PowerPoint presentation. And I'm going to share my slides. Now, you may have down the side pictures of us, and they may get in your road. You can move them around to get them out of the way, or you can actually remove them altogether. I'm going to remove mine altogether, so that all you're seeing is my screen. And I'm going to tell you how to win the ePoster competition. And the slides that I have been prepared on FCI background slides. These slides will be made available to you after this meeting, and you can use these slides as your templates for your own presentations. Now, I would like to reinforce exactly what Robert has said in relation to the position that you should adopt when you are recording in front of a camera, if you are going to do that in addition to your PowerPoint presentation. I have set up my study so that I can look out of the window. You should never have the window behind you, because as soon as you put the window behind you, the lighting means that your face is in the dark. And so you all need to focus on ensuring that you don't have an outside window in the line of the camera when you are taking part in meetings. On the left is the window open during the day. On the right is the situation I'm in at the moment, where I have the curtains drawn and I'm sitting in front of my laptop. Now, my laptop has a camera at the top, and I have built this device for sitting the laptop on, for my notes, which are above the laptop, so that when I read my notes, it looks as if I'm looking at you. And on the right is a tablet, because I found at a couple of meetings, I was presenting, but I couldn't see what I looked like. And it's very valuable to have a tablet up that's also connected to the conference. So that's a little tip for the future. Now, when you are designing your ePoster presentation, your audience wants to know who you are, why you are giving your presentation, how you've done it, what the results are, and what the effect has been. Who are you? What is your name? Where do you work? And what position are you? Are you a trainee, a registrar? Are you a pharmacist? We're interested in knowing who you are, and that should be clear in your presentation. Why did you carry out your research? What stimulated you to carry out your research? That's important. because you could actually win the prize if you've got a very clear direction that you've gone in, and explain why you went in that direction. How did you carry out your study? What were the methods that you've used? The results are very important, and you have to remember that your audience is looking at a laptop or a tablet or even a phone, a mobile phone screen. So you need to present clearly, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. What is the consequence of your research? How is it going to affect clinical practice or patient care or improved efficiency? The influence that your research has on current practice is important, and you should boast about it if you've been able to achieve change. Your slides are going to be presented on the screen of either a computer, a tablet, or a smartphone. Your text must be readable, and Robert's alluded to that in his presentation. Use as large a text font as you can. Your message needs to be clear, and a bit of humor. I threw in a bit of humor at the beginning about educating the English. That comes over well, but not too much, please. And use images to help you get your message across. You can see here that we've got an image of a smartphone, an image of a pain questionnaire. You can use these to stimulate your audience into remembering what you were actually doing. Keep your presentation logical so the reader can follow it. And very important in scientific research, do not make claims that you cannot support. And before you go any further, having drafted your presentation, show it to a friend or colleague, and they will check it for you. And when they check it for you, you will realize that I've missed out in number 4, an R. Keep your presentation logical, silly me. Now, once your presentation is complete, if you're using a PowerPoint, then you should record it and time it. And this can be done by clicking the animations button at the top of the PowerPoint, and then clicking the record button. When you click that record button, you will suddenly be invited to a teaching aid, which helps you develop a timed presentation. And it also allows you to put sound and movies into your presentation. That's already available for you on PowerPoint. Go in there and you will have a nice educational aid to developing your presentation. So you complete your PowerPoint presentation. And how do you present it? You can present it just as a PowerPoint presentation, timed with your voice over on the slides, or you could be a little bit cleverer and you can present your presentation time, but you can speak to it while you're being videoed beside your slides. One way of doing that is to use a Zoom, which we're using today, which is free of charge. You register for a Zoom account. You can put your PowerPoint presentation up on Zoom like I have done tonight. Display it as screen presentation, and you can include your own head and shoulders at the same time. You then record your presentation in the same way that we're recording at the moment, and you then just have to remember the words, get the timings right before submitting the recording to the FCI. Now, I did this an hour ago. I went on Zoom, I put my header slide on Zoom, and I positioned my head and shoulder pictures top right, and that I could have recorded the whole of this presentation with my head and shoulders up in the right-hand corner. And if you're going to do that, you need to prepare your slides so that that part of the presentation is empty and can be covered up by your image. So there's a little bit of planning that goes into it. Now, I have shared with all of you the guidance that we are giving to the judges for marking the ePoster. This is only one part of it, and it's only a guide, but it means that we do get a bit of uniformity in the marking system. We will probably have between 8 and 10 judges marking your ePoster so that bias is reduced to an absolute minimum. And within each category that we have identified, originality, clinical interest, study design, results presented, and quality of presentation, you get a mark from 1 to 5. These are then collated. They will be sent to me. I will put them together, and we will then work out who is top, what the top 3 ePoster presentations are, and the top 3 ePoster presentations already have a slot available on the 30th of November for a 10-minute presentation. So not only should you develop your 6-minute presentation for presenting as an ePoster, but you need to remember that there is a potential, if you are top 3, for a 10-minute presentation. A few more tips. Don't read your slides all the way through. You can read parts of them. If you've done it properly, the reader can read the words, and you should give them additional verbal information. Use your voice to add this additional information, and use emotion. Be committed to your research and what you're doing. It's lovely to see somebody who is enthusiastic delivering a presentation, and you feel, oh, they've got their heart in this and they've done everything they can to get this right. Do add a bit of humor. It's always makes it a little bit more interesting. Don't use too many animations. I've seen people use animations on multiple occasions, and they occasionally do upset viewers. Now, we are simple people. We are only capable of taking home 1 or 2 messages. So at the end of your presentation, you want to think about what message you want us to take home and deliver that in your last slide. Be innovative. How are you going to present your references? Too often, I have seen the last slide absolutely packed with text of references, which no one can read. Nobody has time to write down, and that's a silly situation. If you're very clever, you can actually put up a URL, a location for a web page, or a QR code that the viewer can photograph and then use to go and look at your references. But they are not going to take your references off your slide when you're making a 6-minute presentation. It just doesn't happen. So the ending. Make it clear when you've come to the end, but do not use a whole slide to announce it. If the post-presentation Q&A is already on the program, do not state in the slide, questions please, because the That's already organized. And for post-meeting contact, I usually give the audience my email address for making contact, but alternatives are available, and LinkedIn is very good because you can point people to your LinkedIn page, and then you can decide whether you want to communicate with them or not. So we've come to the end, and I can hear applause, and you can't because we haven't got the technology right. But I have put some audio applause into the last slide. So these are my tips. I'm throwing this open to the audience. I'd like you to put your hand up if you have any questions, and unmute yourself so that you can ask these questions. Kimji, you had the window behind you, is that right?
That is, I was becoming very self-aware through the first presentation, and also have the webcam on the side of me as well, because I'm using it off a laptop rather than my other webcam. I wanted to ask a question regarding slides. You mentioned the slide deck the FCI is using. Having presented partly at an organization, am I okay to present using the slides the organization would like me to present with?
We would like you to present with our layout of slides, our template. We are not insisting on it, but we would like you to do it because it actually advertises the Faculty of Clinical Informatics and the fact that you presented at it. Any other questions? Robert, I'd like to come back to you. Are there any of the points that I made that you either disagree with or would like to reinforce?
Well, from what I heard, you seem to be reinforcing a lot of the points that I had made. That there were certainly no points that I want to disagree with, Angus.
Right. Okay. So, Paul, can I ask you to unmute yourself? You've volunteered to be a judge. Oh, you can't unmute. No, well, I'll see if I can I might be able to unmute you. I'm trying hard.
I think Jerry has to do that in the.
There we are. You're unmuted, Paul. Oh no, you're not. Can you help us, Jerry?
I am trying to, but I think because you've got control. Let me take back host, okay?
Yeah, please.
Paul, you should have a pop-up saying unmute.
Can you click on that pop-up, Paul? No, doesn't work. Okay.
That is bizarre.
Well, the audience is unmuted. Little bit of problem with the technology. We want to unmute all, I think, Paul.
Yeah, I'm not seeing an option for that. That is really bizarre.
Audio settings.
No.
No.
While we're working that out, can I ask a question, Angus? I would imagine everybody here has made some form of presentation. And I liked both of your paces. What would you advise people about pace of speech? Because when people, as we know, are nervous, their pace changes. Any thoughts on that?
There is always a temptation for people to speak quickly because they've always got more to say than the time that's allocated. The normal recommendation for slides is that if you have text slides, it's 1 slide a minute. So if you have a 6-minute presentation, you normally have 6 slides. However, if you are using images, you can actually have 2 images in 1 minute. So that's an alternative. In relation to the speed with which you speak, you should speak more slowly than you normally speak, because and that means that you've got to time your presentation very carefully. Now, Robert will know exactly what we should be doing, and I'm going to ask him to comment at this stage.
Thanks, Angus. I would certainly echo everything that's been said so far. There is a tremendous temptation when you've got a microphone in front of you, when you've got a camera lens in front of you, it does funny things to people. And suddenly it's the rabbit in the headlight phenomenon. And suddenly you want to get this pain over and with as quickly as possible and get it all out of your system, because then you can step down off the platform and the pain will be over. And of course, if you do it like that, well, that's one way of tackling it, but it's not a recommended way. If you do it in a very measured way that Angus has described, then the information that you impart will be more readily absorbable by the audience. And not only that, I would also build in a series of pauses. So I always, or as far as possible, try to have a glass of water on the lectern, because that gives me the opportunity to take a sip every now and then. I may not be thirsty, my throat may not be dry, but it's a conscious act to allow my audience to have a rest, because I've been just spouting on, possibly a little too fast. They need a rest and I need a rest, and actually taking a sip of water is a perfectly acceptable way of doing that. So silence is also good, whether or not you take the water. Just pause for a moment. It'll seem like a lifetime, but the audience need it for the reasons I've described.
Now, Akimji, you spoke earlier. How did you switch your microphone on? Can you switch them?
I've sorted it, Angus. Everybody now has the ability to come off mute.
Lovely.
Apologies.
That's okay, no problem. I think it's possibly because it was set up as a webinar with the opportunity to shut everybody up.
Paul is now off mute, so you know.
Lovely. So, Paul, as a judge, what are you going to be looking for when you judge these ePosters?
So I think what's been said this evening is really helpful. I think it helps people to understand that 6 minutes is not very long, and to break it down into the fundamentals of, as you've said, Prof, who, why, how, results, and effect. And I'm looking for originality of thought. I'm looking for some early results, albeit that it may not be final earth-shattering research, but nonetheless, some early results that will wet the whistle and will see people, or will help people to understand the work that you've put in. And just as importantly, I think it is really good to see good presentation. I think that helps hugely. I think Robert has pointed out some of the pitfalls and how we've all come across people who can't present well, and it makes such a difference to the message. The simplicity that you've spoken about, Angus, is very important. You want to leave them wanting more and leave them with a fundamental message.
I'd like to bring Tim Cross in because he works in on the industrial side. He's also clearly a very keen cyclist.
Yeah, instantly I'm breaking the rule about what I can have in my background. Really, much as Paul has just said, I guess I'm just interested in an engaging presentation, something that's going to, sort of really appeal to me, really get me very interested in the output.
And for everybody who is attending, the rules for the judges are very simple. If you have a conflict of interest with any of the ePosters that are presented, you do not mark that ePoster. Because we have at least 8 judges, we actually can leave one of the judges' scores out, but we average the other 7. So the paper is not disadvantaged in any way. And we also look very carefully at the results. And I do an analysis of not only the means, but also the modes, because you can have some judges that are a little hard, the hawks and the doves. And sometimes you just need to even out the judging a little bit, and your median will help you do that. So there is a lot of background science that is going into assessing the markings, into analyzing the marking system once the marks have been allocated, and we will not be unfair. The top 3 will be the top 3. Any questions from anyone else? You can put your hand up, and you can now unmute yourself. Any points anybody wants to ask? I know Julia has come on board from Careful, and she is going to be involved in presenting, and going to be quite exciting to listen to some of the projects that we have been presented with. Julia, do you want to say anything, or are you quite happy to remain hidden? Yeah, she's quite happy to be hidden. Right. Any final tips before we wind up, Robert?
One has occurred to me during this session. We happen to be working on Zoom. Other platforms are available. Do make sure that the name that is displayed in the bottom left-hand corner as your Zoom name reflects your name in the way that you wish it to come across to your intended audience. Yes, there may be occasions when you would prefer that to be the name of an organization. So, for instance, Jerry is appearing on this as Faculty of Clinical Informatics because that's appropriate in this particular instance. But we've all been on Zooms where somebody appears to be called Dell PC or something less appropriate. So it's one of those things to tidy off before you go live for the real thing.
Lovely. Ladies and gentlemen, I am grateful to you for attending. We will take the recording, post it up on FCI, and we will let you all know where it is posted up so that you can look at it again if you wish to. Adam Kaminchi.
The slide deck would be really useful as well if you could send that out as soon as possible. Thank you.
I shall do. I'll send it out as it is. You'll get the applause at the end, which I've been unable to transmit. Lovely. Thank you everyone for attending, and good luck to all the ePoster presenters. The top 3 are going to win their place on the podium. And then there is a prize of £150 for the winner of the ePoster competition at the conference on the 30th of November. I look forward to seeing you on the 29th and the 30th. As you should be aware, there is a dinner arranged for the evening of the 29th. You are all welcome to attend. You should all have had information about it, and it would be lovely if you are able to join us at that dinner. Thank you for coming to this webinar. It's been good fun, and particular thanks to Robert Trahane-Jones for, did I get that right, Robert?
Nearly. It's Trahane Jones, actually, but not to worry. I've been called many different things during my life.
And Sebastian, thank you for joining us as well. And Jonathan, both judges, very much appreciated. Jonathan, you're basking back on your sofa and obviously relaxing, which is nice to see. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good evening.